Elon Musk emerged as the first trillionaire on the planet, ushering a new era. His fortune reached 1.1 trillion US dollars, allowing him $68.7 million daily spend till he's 100 years old. Musk is expected to reach $1.33 trillion net worth this year, more wealth than 129 countries and exceeding the combined GDP of South Africa, Egypt, and Nigeria. Elizabeth Warren calls it a wake-up call. On social media, Bernie Sanders said Elon Musk, the trillionaire, pays the same amount into Social Security as someone making $184,500, calling for lifting the cap on taxable income to improve funding of benefits. Sanders tweets that the US democracy cannot survive when one man who contributes $290 million to elect Trump becomes $700 billion richer since Trump's election. Musk said in a speech from Starbase, Texas, that the record-breaking SpaceX IPO was hard to believe, vowing to take humanity to Mars and ultimately beyond. Others say a new thriving economy, the space economy, is out of the closet. According to SpaceX CEO and President Gwynne Shotwell, over half of 22,000 employees bought an extra $1 billion of stock. Musk also announced a chip factory 10 times the size of Tesla's gigafactory, producing enough artificial intelligence compute equivalent to twice the entire electricity consumption of the United States. Musk's mom, Faye Musk, has called him a genius of the world, loved and respected for all he does. Earlier, it was also recently posted all over media that Dangote's net worth of $36.5 billion surpasses the entire GDP of Rwanda, Burkina Faso, and Mali. There is no evidence to prove a pattern of state capture and opportunism, despite, like with Musk, there is the common theme of close relationships with ruling governments that could be helpful to exploit advantages unavailable to most other players. Oxfam, a well-known international non-governmental charity organization many would call a spoiler, may be unimpressed at all this. Oxfam helps people in wars, disasters, or famine by providing essentials such as food, clean water, and shelter. In a press release ahead of the June G7 summit, Oxfam says energy billionaires in the G7 have pocketed $300 million a day since the start of the US-Iran conflict, adding that billionaire wealth has so far surged by nearly $10 trillion since 2020. This was also as G7 countries cut aid to the world's poorest countries by $48 billion between 2024 and 2025, as some G7 billionaires accumulated in just 9 days. Oxfam says the world's 12 richest are well there than the poorest half of the world, forecasting that there will be 5 trillionaires within the decade. Hello and welcome to Global Business Insights, where we bring perspectives to help you understand an increasingly complex terrain. Today we consider the coming G7 summit, but focused on Oxfam calling G7 to be alert and not indifferent to the inequality crisis brewing. What is Oxfam saying? 41 G7 energy billionaires are reported to have increased their wealth by $23.5 billion since the war against Iran began, making an equivalent of about $1,000 in the time it takes to blink. Meanwhile, soaring energy and food prices are burdening households worldwide, especially across low and middle-income countries already battered by years of economic turmoil, debt crisis, and climate shocks. All this while 6 oil majors' profits are projected to skyrocket by 80% over pre-war forecasts as profits hit $152 billion in 2026, equivalent to $416 million a day. This windfall, according to Oxfam, extends to other industries, with three of the world's top fertilizer corporations expected to see profits spike by 23% compared to pre-war estimates. Oxfam International Executive Director Amitabh Behar concludes that as conflict devastates countries and costs countless lives, for some it is extraordinarily profitable, adding that a brutal system redistributes wealth upwards from workers to shareholders, from the poorest to the richest, from those with the least power to those who already have far too much of it. Poor families are skipping meals and governments are slashing life-saving aid amid what Oxfam calls a grotesque billionaire bonanza. Oxfam is expressing dismay that a crisis and plague of inequality is being met with political paralysis and retreat as G7 leaders do less than ever to help poorer countries. Oxfam repeatedly criticizes the Trump US administration for its aggressive stance, which is worsening the inequality crisis and will have consequences measured in lives. US Secretary of State has said the US would rather send aid directly to poorer countries and less through non-governmental organizations that have been found to be corrupt and with far less impact. But the facts are clear. Between 2024 and 2025, the G7 presided over the largest reduction in official development assistance in its history. The human cost is catastrophic. As today, Oxfam says 44 people fall into a humanitarian emergency every single minute. Crucially, Oxfam warns that the remaining G6 leaders have immense independent financial and diplomatic leverage that they are also choosing to withhold, adding that these countries are now at risk of slipping into global irrelevance. Aid cuts have led to an alarming inability to contend with health crises as the World Health Organization declares the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo as a public health emergency of international concern, with 150 deaths so far confirmed and 710 confirmed cases. Also, needed surveillance systems that should have detected this outbreak weeks earlier were also impacted by aid cuts. Oxfam is therefore calling for implementation of a four-part response to protect ordinary people. First is to tax the excessive profits of corporations and the super rich to reduce inequality. Second is to replicate the COVID-19 playbook by immediately suspending all bilateral debt payments from low and middle income countries and act to compel private creditors to do the same. Third is to boost aid by returning to the 0.7% gross national income target. The fourth part is to support an immediate new issuance of special drawing rights through the IMF, decoupled from quota shares, to inject much needed liquidity into struggling economies without adding to their debt burdens. Also, Oxfam wants international financial institutions to deploy conditionality-free emergency lending, mirroring the crisis response deployed during the pandemic. Quite a lot to ask at a time when many G7 countries face tighter fiscal space and have been forced to spend much more on defense, reducing capacity to spend on welfare and aid, also as buffers continue to be eroded by higher debt burdens. My main critique on Oxfam's excellent analysis and clarion call is that it seems to ignore the potential for, say, an Africa to do more to upgrade governance, build welfare institutions, and plug vast leakages and inefficiencies, summarizing from a still weak business and economic integration that is not helped by high distrust between African countries and absence of bolder leadership that sees the upsides of more intra-African cooperation to fight poverty. Beyond aid, well-known obvious reform hot buttons like sorting out electric power, more infrastructure like roads to improve access, and doing business in poorer areas, processing raw materials locally, and better schools and health facilities offer opportunities to do more to address poverty. Most people in poor countries such as Africa work in low productivity farming or informal street trade, which traps them in a cycle of much lower income. In an earlier post, I spoke on why a different approach to supporting the informal sector is key to reducing poverty. Also, more direct interventions to lift the poor are needed, as this will not happen automatically from improved macroeconomics or better business performance of, say, top corporates. The problem of inequality in developed countries can be more complex as Musk extends the gap ahead of the others. Larry Page, the second richest in the US, is worth $300 billion, far from Musk. In Africa also, the wealthiest man's wealth of $36 billion is more than double the second richest African. So the richest, you could say, are also getting richer than the rich. The accusation of US Democrats that today's capitalism is easily exploited through the collaboration of government and industry actors should not be swept under the carpet. There should be more alertness, especially in far more vulnerable and less mature political environments as we have in Africa. While governments seek stronger economies to raise tax revenues and improve overall well-being, corporate moguls have become increasingly shrewd at spotting opportunities and using political ties to secure advantages. Musk has ushered a new era of the trillionaire. Many will argue that if SpaceX does not deliver the much touted value proposition of a new vibrant space economy, his net worth will slip back. But here's Sam Altman, OpenAI boss, who recently said we are going to see 10-person billion-dollar companies pretty soon, urging younger people to build app studios. In other words, income inequality may just be taking off, and it has nothing to do with ties to politicians. To be clear, we do not say that tomorrow's trillionaires will all be villains. What we know with more certainty is that today far less attention is being given to the problem of inequality and poverty. There has to be a better way, and Musk must also see that. At the coming G7 summit in Evian, France, Oxfam will do all it can to draw attention to critical issues expunged from the G7 agenda, such as the plague of inequality, impacts of aid cuts, and the stark reality of water scarcity in Gaza. Kenya's President Ruto will represent Africa at the summit, which kicks off on Monday, June 15 in Evian-les-Bains, France. Leaders from Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, UK, US, and the EU meet with an agenda focused on geopolitical crisis, AI governance, and supply chain disruptions. The G7 meetings will hold amid the usual protests from activists. With dinner, pomp, and circumstance planned at the extravagantly gilded Versailles Palace, it will be hard for G7 delegates to spare some thoughts for the poor. Macron is said to be pulling out the stops to keep Trump from leaving the meeting early. Iran and the war's effect on energy prices are likely to dominate conversations as Trump says he has authorized the opening of the Strait of Hormuz and immediate removal of the US naval blockade following a completed agreement with Iran to be signed in Switzerland on June 19. OpenAI chief Sam Altman was also invited to participate in G7 talks. The other major focus in the coming week will be Kevin Warsh's first outing as chair of the US Federal Open Market Committee and how much change will be signaled. Well, that's it on this very special episode of Global Business Insights. We are now on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, podcasts, and most popular platforms where you get your podcasts from. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.